Welcome to the Questionistas podcast. I'm Thomas.
And I'm Spencer.
Quick disclaimer, this is for education and entertainment purposes only. If you need help, please see a professional. We are not experts, nor do we give medical advice. Take our words with a gallon of salt.
Thomas, what's the topic for today?
Topic today is how and why do we think in groups? One of the main reasons I wanted to bring this up is there are a lot of benefits to thinking together in groups. And one of the biggest ones was Jesus' metaphor of it's easy to see the speck in your neighbor's eye and miss the log in your own eye. There are a lot of biases that protect you from being too critical of your own thinking. There's a lot of potential reasons for this, like the ability to argue might have evolved in a context to convince other people that you were right, not necessarily for you to find what's right. But that's why working in groups is so good, is that you gain the benefit of other people's thinking, and the other people don't have those same biases for protecting your ego. They have it for theirs, but they don't have it for yours. Like if I'm talking to Spencer, even though he's a nice person, he doesn't have the crazy instincts and biases that are about protecting Thomas's ego.
Yeah, I think I experience quite often a room of people where all of us have a goal to work together or to come to a conclusion and a decision, but everyone has a different agenda in being there. And not malicious agendas, but just I'm in charge of a different part of the process. So you may come up with an idea, but when that idea may affect me very negatively, I'm able to see the problems in your biased, excited option that you come up with, but it's going to harm me unintentionally and sometimes intentionally, but allowing for that group opportunity for the others to say, well, that's a great idea, except for that doesn't work for me, because everyone has an agenda coming into the room.
Yeah, I like that. One thing I want to talk about is how important it is that humans work as community creatures. In some aspects of Western culture, there's a lot of individualism, which, in its defense, in the last couple hundred years, has actually been really beneficial to humanity. I got this from Jonathan Haidt's book called The Righteous Mind. He's a psychologist and a researcher, and he writes a lot about moral foundations psychology. He talks about something called the hive effect, which is something that kicks in like when you're with a big group of people. It can happen at a rave, it can happen at a big religious event, it can happen at sports events where your brain starts to become part of a group. And he describes that as humans being the only primates with ultra-social tendencies. And ultra-social tendencies refers to communicating with each other and doing different things to achieve the same goal. There's apparently no other primates really seem to do that. They might be doing the same thing at the same time, but they're not working together on the level that we are. Other species that have ultra-social aspects, various birds, lots of insects, like ants and bees, where you become part of the whole. We do that is because it helps us survive. We work together and are not surviving individually, but together. It's literally a group effort.
Well, I'm thinking about an experience. I went to my first ever Major League Baseball game a couple months ago. If you've ever been in such a large crowd or stadium, the wave starts happening. I have no interest whatsoever in doing the wave. But yet when it comes around, it's like, okay, fine, I'll participate. And for some reason, you see a couple people trying to start it, and then it gets started, and then it dies out, and it only goes a couple aisles. But then they keep trying, and then all of a sudden it goes around the stadium multiple times, and then you see it fizzle out. Is that what you're talking about at a very rudimentary level?
Yeah, when it gets to you, and you're like, well, okay, I guess I'll do it. That's partially that hive instinct in your brain kicking in. Now, some of us do have more individualist strains.
Where, yeah, and you can see that not every single person is doing it, but it definitely, is a majority. And at some point, the reason it dies out is like, okay, we're done with this. I don't want to do this anymore. Even though they may have done it on the previous 3 times.
The benefit of that instinct of everybody doing something together is civilization. There's a lot of aspects that our evolution, we've gotten to the point that we're getting smarter as individuals, but there's a reason. One of the other reasons that humans have thrived so much is that we have figured out how to distribute labor in a way that we act like a larger entity. In fact, in Jonathan Haidt's book, he even calls them superorganisms. He argues that large groups of humans, including things like corporations, are fit the actual definition of a superorganism. Kind of like in your cells, you've got multiple types of what they say, something is the powerhouse of the cell, and inside each cell there's a couple of different things going on, a couple different entities doing things. Like, you're a superorganism, and he argues that a large group of people is technically also a superorganism.
So it's mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, whatever that means. No, I mean, it's funny. It's become a meme that my kids talk about a lot and as a joke, and it's like, well, at least you learned something from biology class. So you're saying there's certain people that are motivators and able to motivate the larger group to, I don't want to say cooperate, but participate with the group. Is that what that idea is with a hive?
It's not as much about an individual getting the whole group to go, though I do want to talk about that. But it's just, when you feel everybody doing something, you feel this force pushing you. Like, I don't care about hockey at all. Went on a business trip to Texas, and we went to a hockey game, and I could feel it. I could feel the energy affecting me. Screaming and cheering. And I'm like, what am I doing? My image of myself is that I don't care about this sport, but there's this euphoria that you get by being in a big crowd and doing things.
So what does that have to do with asking questions in a group? Because we're establishing a norm of, when it comes to you, shout and cheer or boo because there was a bad call, or do the wave. Like, those are very rudimentary physical aspects. But what about when it comes to asking questions and trying to motivate people to do something that's not within their norms, or not within a norm that you're establishing by waving your hands up high?
Yeah. And up to this point, we've been talking about human nature towards acting in groups, and the aspect of starting to ask questions and breaking down how we function in groups. That's where you start to get to human potential about the cool things that we can do when we work together. So I'm glad we talked about some of the more positive aspects of group thinking first, but what are the challenges that can happen when you think as a group? What are some of the more negative or less effective tendencies that can happen when you get larger groups? There's a group of biases that evolved for you to keep your position in the group, to protect yourself. Things like groupthink or herd mentality, going with the group, even if you personally might not think it's the best idea. Like, for example, for groupthink, that's following the most confident or the first heard voice in group decision because you don't want to be the person speaking out. Or herd mentality, which is taking on the beliefs or the opinions and behaviors of the majority because it helps you feel safe and to avoid conflict. But that's when, instead of taking advantage of working in groups, you put the working in the group above the goal. Like, does that make sense? Go ahead.
I've got a thought around that. You have a social capital within your group. And so your social capital, the way that it was explained to me was, you're going to do things that will not please someone else in this room at some point. But if you can build and curry favor with them now and show, it's bring them cookies, to ask them how their day's going, listen to them and understand what they're going through, and understanding, either in the workplace, outside of the environment that you work together, whether it's at church, at work, at an institution, at a volunteer place, and finding out more about them, you build up social capital, and you build up an ability to do something that may harm them, or may feel like they have been harmed or threatened. Maybe let's say threatened, because it's not really you're harming them. But you do something that threatens them by, they say, hey, I've got an idea. Let's do X. And you're like, yeah, but Y is better. And let me tell you why. And all of a sudden you made them look really dumb, or they perceive that they've been felt like they've been seen as a dumb person in the group. You have built up a capital with them. That social cost that you just spent, you just wrote a check against the bank account, is how someone explained that social capital is. It's a literal bank.
So social, just to try to clarify real quickly, capital, the amount of goodwill that you've invested in your relationship with someone, that you can do things that are going to cause a little bit of tension, but because you've built up that good relationship, it's not going to ruin the relationship. In fact, it could be really good. If you just criticize people all the time, then they're just not going to like you.
And in the idea of a social capital or that bank, they're writing checks, and at some point they're writing against a debt that they can't pay down because they're just constantly doing it. I worked with one person that everyone on the team's like, hey, good job. We made this progress. We moved an inch over here. And it's like, yeah, well, we screwed up and we're set back a foot over here. And he identified every time that we screwed up, that everyone's like, we know that. Don't say it so loudly because you're not really favored in this group right now. And you're writing checks against something that doesn't help you.
Your bank account is in the red and you're getting overdraft fees.
Yes. And his overdraft fees were through the roof. And he kept like, we need to talk about that. I'm like, okay, there's a place and a time to figure out how to talk about that. But cashing against that social bank account when you don't have anything in there, yeah, you're in the red and your withdrawal fees are accruing, and it's not helping anyone.
Yeah. I want to summarize some of our points up to here. Is we're talking a lot about the benefits and obstacles of working as a group towards a problem, thinking together about how to solve the problem. And we're getting into some of the challenges and obstacles with that. Mm-hmm. We established that humans are community creatures and we work together to achieve things and to solve group problems. But there are obstacles in the way of that. Social capital is a really good example because we got these two layers of instincts going on: individual-focused instincts and group-focused instincts. Sometimes the individual instincts win out, at least for some people in the group, and it messes us up. One example I want to bring up is the hippo problem. Mm. The hippo problem is when the group overweights the highest individually paid person's opinion. You get into a meeting and the CEO is there or somebody else higher up in the company. And this is really from the perspective of getting to the best solution. Because sometimes you got to follow the highest paid person's opinion, at least to some extent, because they're responsible for whether you still have a job or not. And we're talking about the perspective of trying to come up with better or best solutions. Like, how do we think more effectively in a group with all these different brains?
So I think I just got it. HIPPO, HIPPO, highest individual paid person opinion.
Yes.
The acronym is the phrase.
Oh, yes.
Of the person. Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a great one. I've never heard that one before.
Plus, hippos are terrifying.
I actually knew a friend that worked a lot with universities, and at state school, you can see the salaries of every person. So he would research and figure out how much is everyone getting paid in the
Really?
room. But here's the thing. He used it to his advantage because he knew everyone was he knew the game that was going to get played, but he was also an outsider coming to convince them to do something that may be different from the group. He didn't have to convince anyone except for the hippo. And so he would be presenting to 10 people, but he was actually presenting to one. So in some ways,
whether that's how the groups should work, that's a good example of rationality because he figured out the system, how it worked, and he adjusted his behavior for what would actually work with that. It's pretty dang smart.
So in some ways, like the herd mentality, the group think, the hippo problem, they're just the nature of how a group exhibits themselves. And being able to identify those seems like more powerful than it is to work within that system. Because once you identify it, then you know which tools to employ to convince the right people or to get them to do what you want them to do.
And I sometimes have this attitude with my work. What can we do to improve this situation or make this more efficient?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people say, this is up to this person at this level of the organization who's higher up than me. There's nothing we can do.
Mm-hmm.
And legitimately, sometimes there is nothing you can do. But I like to start with the assumption that even though I have to get the hippo's permission, then how about I learn more about the hippo? How about I understand what appeals to them? You're not always going to be able to convince them to do something different, because how many times have we been in situations where somebody higher up says, we're going to do X, and you're like, everything I know tells me that X is a stupid idea.
Mm-hmm.
Don't automatically assume that there's nothing you can do.
I have worked with a group at an organization that was very hippo oriented. The hippo thought that they knew everything, but it was a game of convincing the hippo that it was their idea all along.
Which again is another example of learning to function in the system you're in instead of just complaining about it.
Right. So we came in as a consulting group to figure out what we could do to help improve. And we created 2 interview groups. We interviewed the group that was the hippo, and we let the hippos just tell us everything that was wrong with the system. And I don't want to say summarily threw it all away, but we disregarded it fairly quickly because
at least on an explicit level, right? Like,
correct.
People can like say everything that they think is wrong, and behind those words, you can be like, okay, here's what's probably actually wrong.
Yeah,
this is just how they're interpreting it.
We went to the second group and we said, "Hey, can you tell us what's happening?" And we got completely different answers and completely different problems that were like, oh, that makes much more sense why the problems are existing the way they do. There was a little bit of bridge where sometimes you'd find a hippo that was actually in tune with their people, with their underlings or whatever you want to call them.
With the people on the ground.
With the people on the ground. There's a famous study that Qualtrics did where they surveyed thousands of companies, and they asked a whole bunch of low-level customer-facing employees, mid-level management, and then C-level executives. How is our company doing? And what do you think the customers think about us? And so they had the customer score, and they said, "What on a scale of 1 to 5, what does customers think about us?" And who do you think was most accurate to what the customer score was? It was phenomenally accurate to those that were customer service, that worked with the customers day in, day out. And it was phenomenally like 95% were completely off in the executive level. They had no
Gosh,
clue.
and I was going to say, not only at the executive level, but you've got other departments that are technically at the same level. Like if you go hierarchically, vertically, who might be at the same level at customer service, but working in something else, they have a good chance of getting it really wrong too.
Yeah, absolutely. It showed very quickly and easily just the easier that we can get. And then Qualtrics tries to say on their pitch, it's a great study, but then they're like, well, now you use our tool to convey that customer feedback directly to the execs. And it's like, okay, cool. If they have time to read it.
That is a potential solution to the problem.
Right. And it's a very costly one, but they love doing it because they make money when you buy their product. But it's a reality that just being able to talk with certain people and making sure everyone's felt heard in that group. I want to go back to the original. Why do we think in groups? How do we think in groups? So like we're talking about it, but why not? Why not just have the hippo do everything? Who cares about everyone else's voices? And ultimately, it's because other people have good answers and other people can contribute and other people can solve the things in a way that may serve the same purpose as the hippo in the room, but it allows other people to feel like they're involved. That's something that in my own personal work and in my career, I've done or tried to emphasize is we're going to do something that everyone feels on board with, not just the one person that made the decision. Because hopefully coming up with a decision or an idea that everyone feels good about will come to arrive to a solution that everyone will actually execute on.
Yeah. Part of what we're talking about is the conflict between I was going to say individualism and communalism, but it's not even that. It's individualism and loyalty. There is a function that loyalty to a hierarchy serves for humans. It helps us focus goals in a certain direction. But the drawback is when people who have other good options or good solutions are restricted in what they can bring forward. But when we're talking about individualism versus being in the group, so we've got people following the opinions of somebody else for a few different reasons. One is to not sacrifice their position in the group, not to overspend their social capital. Another one is somebody else seems more confident. Somebody else speaks first and affects everyone's thoughts going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Or somebody is seen as more important. I find that I'm sometimes the first and the loudest person. So I have to push for more input from other people. Just because somebody is not as loud and as obnoxious as me does not mean that they have less of a valid opinion. There are different tactics for trying to lessen the effects of those problems. And one of my favorite that I don't get to use nearly as much as I would like is writing separately and sharing anonymously. This has to do with you've got a topic that you're going to discuss. The question that this answers is, how do I help a group to empower people to contribute individually without being too affected by, the loudest person or the first person or the most important person? And one of the ways you do that is before the meeting or discussion even happens, you say, hey, here's the problem or the question that we're addressing today. Can all of you think about this independently and make some notes or questions or solutions about this and gather these thoughts as anonymous as you can? Sometimes that's hard. And share them with the group at the beginning of the discussion. It helps to downplay the overconfident, the loudest, the hippo, because the ideas are brought up as close as you can without the hierarchy or the loudness or who speaks first coming into play. So you read everybody's thoughts on the subject, and it loses most of, not all, but most of that flavoring. And I find that that's a really good way to get a discussion started, is to get people's input in a context that is not related to social relationships. Like,
what's the context then?
The context is, well, obviously this is for like a group problem that you'd know about. What I mean is, you have all the social dynamics that have to do with hierarchy and keeping your place in the group.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do one of these, then you're removing the slightly shyer person who has an important opinion to share, and Thomas, who is louder and more confident, speaking first, affecting the whole conversation.
Interesting. Have you found an effective tool to utilize that anonymous aspect? Because I get the go think about it and come with your solutions.
There was a couple of tools in Jira that did that, but one time when I didn't have access to any of those tools, I just shared everyone a link to a Google Doc, asked them to open it on a browser that they weren't logged into Google on. Everybody would claim a different sheet, and then we did this in the meeting, but everybody filled out their thoughts on their own sheets, which had no names on them. And then I stuck them in a pile, added a randomized number order next to them, and then I sorted by number. I found a way for them to input them anonymously, me to put them together, and to shuffle them up. And I found that really helped that conversation.
I've done an exercise similar to that called empathy mapping, where you basically take a whole bunch of ideas and put each of them on a sticky note. And then you allow people to not randomly, but systematically, but of your own choice, you're assigning like these 3 ideas all seem to talk about bubblegum. So I'm going to put them over here together, and this is the bubblegum problem. And these 4 over here are related to this. And then someone can come by and it's like, this is not a bubblegum problem. This is a shoelace problem. And they are moving around, and you can tell that other people are moving them, but you have just as much luxury to move that one problem back to bubblegum. I'm trying to be abstract here, but
yeah, maybe we should try a little more concrete, but continue.
It was survey questions related to a website. And it was identifying all the problems that were on the website and what people wanted, what people were there for, and why they wanted what information they wanted better than what they could get. And so we were categorizing them. But what was interesting is everyone had to stand up. The hippo couldn't do anything without standing up and moving stuff around just as much as everyone else. And so everyone had the exact amount of labor.
So the format of the conversation wasn't dependent on your skills of like controlling a group conversation.
Yeah, pretty much.
Similar to my tactic I was talking about, you took charisma or skills of manipulating a discussion out of the equation. But I'm maybe not quite understanding the format that you're talking about. Tell me a bit more about the format.
No, I think that's very close to what it was, because it wasn't of trying to convince anyone of anything. The only way you could convince people is physically move the pieces. And you had to rely on each other to move the stuff. And you could only touch so many sticky notes and so many comments because there was hundreds. And so you ended up having to rely on other people's ability to also follow suit with the main goal.
So people are like putting things on sticky notes and physically actually moving them around.
And no matter how hard you tried, you couldn't move every single sticky note. Now, what I thought was interesting, and it usually came from someone that wasn't the hippo or the leader in the group, was a question like, hey, I saw this one keeps showing up over here. What are you guys thinking about this? And it would create a micro conversation, and then we'd go back to organizing and sorting.
Oh, yeah. I remember in the company we worked at together, we did that a couple of times with customer feedback from surveys.
Right.
Like Stan, he would print out those big fat sticky notes, which had the comments from people. And the thing that's fascinating about that, like using physical space to think, we don't use that enough nowadays. But we use the physical space to think, and everyone's moving things into categories. And so you get these little conversations of, oh, I think this should be here. I think this should be here. Oh, wait, maybe we need a third category. Or, you know what? I guess you're right. It is a little bit more in that topic that you're saying. So you start making compromises in a good way. So it's all these competing interests. I don't want to say averaging out at something, but unifying on something.
Yeah, I think unifying is a better word than averaging, because it didn't feel like a compromise. It didn't feel like anyone was compromising. If someone felt strongly that there was a concept that wasn't being discussed because it's shown right here on this comment, we were able to explore that and discuss that with the group. And so it felt like a team group effort more than it was a compromise or averaging out the problem.
So there's 2 more things I want to talk about here.
Yeah.
And then we'll either end or split the episode. The first thing is the problem of playing in the monkey house and the tool of Grow, which I think I learned from you and has been one of the most incredible, useful tools for getting a conversation into a good place. But first, let's talk about what playing in the monkey house is. Tell me more about that.
This came from a guy that he worked at Disney, and very creative group experiences that they would have. And quite often it's kind of the opposite of the groupthink, where it's like everyone settles on something that no one agrees on, but no one's going to speak up and can be contrary to it. This one is everyone gets excited about the idea, but they keep spinning on that one idea, but they don't really evolve and improve on it. And he said, imagine going to a monkey house and you've seen them at the zoo, and the monkeys are in there and they are having fun. They're dancing. And eventually someone starts throwing poop at each other. But the monkeys are having a blast, and they just look like they enjoy throwing poop at each other, which at the moment, I suppose it's fun. But at the end of the day, the idea that comes out stinks just as bad as the playtime. And so he said that it was one of the code words for, I think we're stuck on an idea. And he'd say, I think we're playing in the monkey house. And anyone in the room could say it and say, I think we're playing in the monkey house a little too much on this idea. Let's move on. Let's try it. Let's execute on it and see if it works. Let's create a prototype real quick. Let's share it with someone that hasn't been part of this and see if it sounds like a good idea to them. Because quite often those ideas in the monkey house sound like a really fun idea, but just are completely unrealistic. They stink when you come to try them out. But there's something there, and trying it out, creating a prototype of it is the first step. And so either saying the phrase, hey, let's try it, because we're just talking, and oh my gosh, I got the best idea ever. This is going to be so great. Well, yeah, we're all going to make millions of dollars with my great idea that I have in my head. But until we put pen to paper, until we try it out, will we actually see if it actually makes sense for other people outside of the monkey house? So there's that one. And I think Grow.
Yeah, I kind of want to help us transition into Grow a little bit here. What you're talking about is one type of, like, I'll call it conversation spiraling. Because we're trying to answer the question, when is it time to stop exploring or analyzing, and when is it time to move forward? So yours was a bit more fun, but there are other times that people will get stuck in loops on a conversation. And I've had situations where we have another meeting on a topic, and it was just a continuation of the conversation. It goes for an hour, and it gets cut off. And all we do, and half of what you do is just regurgitate concerns. The thing that I love about the GROW method, which I'll explain what that acronym stands for in a half a second, is that it gives you a structure for each part of the conversation. Because, again, like we were saying in our questions and then our answers episode, it's important to explore the problem. But if you spend eternity exploring the problem or the question, you're never going to pick an answer and run with it. And heck, the best way to evaluate answers and solutions is to try them out. So GROW, it stands for goals, realities, options, and either way forward or will, depending on who you talk to. And it's a way to focus your conversation. And in fact, I do this like basically across the meeting. And the main point that I want to talk about, and then I'll let you explain the first few steps, Spencer, is that by the end of a meeting, if there are like 5 minutes left and we're still exploring the problem or the question, I will usually cut everyone off and say, hey, we either need to come up with some next steps about what we're going to do, or we need to schedule more time. Either way, by the end of a meeting, you should have an actual next step, even if it's just, we need to schedule more time to finish this conversation.
Have you ever found this to be productive more than an hour?
Yes. Not
question. Have you ever had a meeting effective more than an hour?
Yes, I have. I've had some meetings. Gosh, we did a working session with my design team last week that went for it was like 2.5 hours, and it was actually really productive, and we had a lot of participation from everybody. But most of the time, like an hour and 15 minutes, when you start getting past an hour, the efficiency of the conversation starts going down. Yeah, people start losing the energy to participate.
I'll explain how to solve that problem with GROW, because like you said, it ends up being just scheduling another meeting, but there's usually some outcomes that still come out of it that feel fulfilling, that feel rewarding.
Makes it feel like you're making progress.
That you're making progress, because usually the big thing is it explains itself. You, within a minute, you say the goal of this meeting is to do X, Y, and Z. If you can write it on a whiteboard, you're better than you're going to be better off than not. The second one, realities, is usually where people get tripped up, because everyone thinks reality is an option, and realities are just realities.
I always have to, when I'm teaching new people how to do this, people get goals and realities mixed up with options. Another word for options would be like solutions. Mm-hmm. It's when you're jumping ahead to how can we fix this, past we need to understand what we want, and we need to understand what this is. What is the problem, and what do we want?
Yeah, and realities is a lot of that time where I guarantee you the longer you can spend in realities, the better off you're going to be, because usually what happens is someone says, "Well, I think here's an option." You can throw it at the beginning, and what's unknown to that person, and the kind of the beginning of this that I was talking about, someone else has a different agenda. I'm going to say all we have to do is make a web page that does X. And they're like, that's fine, but that's going to require this person over here to print that out 500 times and go through 500 pages for all of the customers every time they submit an entry in there. So that causes more problems than it solves. The reality is, if everyone can get down and say, here's what I do, here's what I do, here's what I'm dealing with, here's why this is a problem. The last time this happened, you're able to identify so many realities that most of the options that don't work or wouldn't have worked in the first place are gone from people's minds. And then they're
because you've already established the what's the word, the restrictions of reality that make it so that
the 500 printing page option is just not even worth our time. And you're actually wasting our time by bringing that option up before listening to everyone else. So,
yeah, I mean, how many times me as a designer looking at an engineer and thinking, well, why don't you guys just do X? Because they have a whole list of realities that I don't know.
Yeah. And the realities are the restrictions of the technology that they're using, the way that they're set up, the way that it takes so long for a new feature to be implemented, that what you're suggesting is just unrealistic. So instead of saying, why can't you just do X? Coming to them, not spending social capital, but most likely gaining social capital with them by saying, hey, I'm interested in this idea. Here's my ideas. What realities and restrictions do you have that would make that possible or impossible, so that I can be on the same page as you?
Yeah.
So, and that's the cool part, is you can, in a 1 hour meeting with 20 people, I've done it, on a whiteboard, a GROW, and you spend 45 minutes on realities, and the options are thin, but the options are all realistic. And then you get to the options, and there's either two options that come out. Options are, we know what to do to make this happen. We're going to do we're going to implement this tool, and we're going to execute on it, and in 2 weeks we'll have it done. Cool. And then that's the way forward. That way forward is just, there's only really one thing in there. But in that way forward, you say, okay, Janet, you're going to do this. Jim, you're going to do that. Thomas, you're going to do this. And by
specific actions for specific people.
Right.
Not general vague goals. These are specific things to do.
Right. And one even great test from the book that I learned this from is, you say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely do you think that we're going to be able to complete this way forward? Ooh. And I don't know if I ever told you about this one or if you use this, but it's a really cool test, because the book said, if you don't get an 8 out of everyone, don't do it. Start over. I've never been as brave to do that, but I've at least said, okay, what other option would actually make more sense? What other option would get us to an 8 or a 9?
Because sometimes you've got a reality in there, which is, we need to pick a way forward right now.
And that's option or outcome 1 of that meeting. The other outcome is, in the realities, there's certain realities like, well, we just don't have enough information about this tool. We don't have enough information about the cost of this. We don't have the information about the timeline for this. And all of a sudden the options are not, well, we're going to build this thing and be done. It's, we need to do more research. Option 1, do more research here. Option 2, do more research there. Learn more about this system. And by the end of it, we still have an outcome, which is the way forward. Okay, Thomas, you're going to do this. Janet, you're going to do that. And we're going to come back and we're going to do another growth session where we accumulate all that information, add on to the realities. And we've already, got a leg up because we already have all these realities documented. And then we create the solution, hopefully, that we filled in all the gaps that we didn't realize that we had until we identified as many realities.
Yeah.
Really powerful.
Yeah. One aspect of this I want to talk about a little bit more is how to use this to reduce the social cost for speaking, and how you introduce these different topics can affect that. Like, for example, realities. When you're introducing realities, I like to say these are not excuses, these are factors. You're asking me to do this thing, and it's almost impossible, or it's basically impossible because of why. You shouldn't be shamed for sharing that. Because one of the realities might be we perceive this as an impossible obstacle. Either way, get it on the board.
Yeah.
Even if you think that it's a reality, if one person thinks it's not a full reality that affects everything, another person does, like, just get it up there, because whether it's an actual impossible to overcome thing, and at least someone's mind it is, and that in and of itself is a reality.
When ideally you would dig in a deeper and like, well, what do you mean? Why is that impossible? Well, I only have 8 hours in the day. Okay, that's fine. What do you mean? Well, you're asking me to spend 7 hours a day on this, and I've already got an 8-hour work week. Oh, we need more headcount. That's a new reality.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Instead of getting stuck in the mindset of, like, sometimes businesses and people in general sometimes do this. Well, you just have an attitude problem. Like, you need to decide that this is possible, or every problem can be resolved if everyone just decides that they're going to work hard enough to fix it.
Yep.
Yeah, working harder.
Give me a little
working smarter works better than working harder 10 times.
Okay, you ready for this? I've used this with my wife. I was about to say on my wife. I haven't used this on my wife. I've used this with my wife, and countless times we are faced with a scheduling problem. We have a bonus of a couple extra $100 and we want to do something with it. And she clearly has a different idea of how she wants to spend it versus me, or we don't have the money for it, but she wants to decorate the backyard and put new landscaping in. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about all the realities of what that means. I've done this on small things, on what are we going to do for a date? And I've done this with my kids at very young ages. Now, it doesn't look as structured, but it allows them to talk and allows me to ask a lot of questions. It allows them to feel heard, which is a really powerful tool to building social capital with kids, let alone adults in the room. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I love being the facilitator of that meeting, because I feel like I gain a lot of social capital with a lot of people in that room, because you get to ask people, why are you doing this? What do you want more out of this? What are you thinking? What are your ideas? And what are your problems? And they feel heard, and they're like, man, that guy, he's so cool. He helps me feel heard. So I have some selfish reasons for doing it, but it's effective everywhere, in friends, in it's not, and I never have felt it's manipulative.
Yeah. I think that one other thing that this helps with, especially with the realities, and I think we'll probably end this here, and I probably am thinking about this because it affects me so much.
Mm-hmm.
You need to get past the idea that a perfect option exists.
Yeah.
And once you get used to that, then you can pick an option and move forward with it and not get stuck in the first couple of steps of this. You can pick, all right, we're going to do this thing. We're going to move forward, even knowing that it's not going to be perfect. And sometimes the only way to know that it's not going to be perfect is by just actually doing it. And that helps people to have less pressure on what realities and options they bring into it, because it's like, we have no option apart from imperfect. So stop acting like perfect isn't, like, stop acting as if you can come up with a perfect solution, because you can't.
Mm-hmm. And I think feeling like you can come up with an option that everyone feels good about, everyone feels at an 8 or a 9 on, is very meaningful. It's, everyone feels, part of the decision. Everyone feels like
they feel some ownership over the decision if you go
Correct.
through these sorts of processes with it. And that is Even when you were talking about making the hippo feel like it was their idea, here we're talking about it is everyone's idea. We are creating it together because it is not one person's brain that's doing the work.
Right.
It's all of our brains working together. So you can't just rip out one person and say that the ownership is that. And I think that's, unless you have something else, Spencer, I think that's probably a good place to stop. Is that feeling of using our abilities to work together and to think individually and finding ways to mesh those well. That's what leads to, what I like to call human potential rather than human nature, which can be, decaying into arguments and flinging monkey poo in the monkey cage. If you look at these things and think about them, there's always a way to think better as a group. And there are many advantages to thinking as a group that you don't get when you're thinking alone. So there you go.
Yeah, and maybe next time we can talk about human potential, because I think that gets me down a line of thought that'll take us another hour.
A human nature versus human potential, I think, will be a great topic. Everybody, thank you for your time. Have a wonderful day and keep asking questions.
Bye.